Swamiji, how does one develop a burning desire for liberation?
When we realize that samsara is full of pain, we will develop a burning desire for liberation. There are many stories about it, but the main analogy that is given is when you realize that your house is on fire, you will develop a burning desire to escape this house and to escape this fire. You'll do anything possible. If you desire that you are drowning, you'll have a burning desire to breathe, one breath even. So it's like this, everything seems to be just fine, everything seems to be very enjoyable, that's okay, but if we use the power of discrimination, if we are able to analyze our existence and the existence of everyone else, we will realize the nature of samsara, the nature of this cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, and what is between. And the nature is suffering. Lord Buddha describes this about, let's say, 2,000 years ago and more or more. He lived around 500 BC, and he spoke about 4 universal truths. And the first amongst the universal truths is the universal truth of suffering. He was a prince. His father did everything in his power to bestow upon him pleasure. And the father was not successful. He could see to the charade of temporary pleasure into the reality of the life of samsara. Because of it, he abandoned his life as a prince that was very enjoyable. He was a healthy person, he was a young person, he was very beautiful. He could have anything desirable, he was very rich, and he escaped in the middle of the night with his attendant, and he searched for a teacher that will show him how to escape this suffering. He realized that suffering is universal and he's also going to experience it. His father could not help him, nobody could help him. Everyone is going to experience this. So he understood, he was very clear, and he said that he described the different forms of suffering, and he pointed to spiritual ignorance as the root cause of all suffering. So mumukshutvam, a burning desire for spiritual liberation, requires first of all to receive knowledge. We are not going to figure it out ourselves. This is extraordinarily difficult. Lord Buddha did figure it out, but he was an avatar, he was a divine incarnation. So he figured it out, but afterwards he had to teach it to others. We need to receive knowledge, we need to meditate, we need to contemplate, we need to meditate deeply of those things, or on those things that are quite dislikable. For example, to meditate on death. Nobody likes to meditate on death, but it's an important meditation. To meditate on the fact that the physical body is changing all the time destroys everything. To meditate on the fact that everything is ephemeral, temporary, this cannot be stopped. To meditate on the fact that whatever we do desire, we do not get, and whatever we get, we do not necessarily desire. Everything is topsy-turvy. We do not control our circumstances. We do not control the story of our life. We cannot predict the future. We cannot control the future. The only thing that we can get to stop all of this suffering is wisdom or knowledge. So mumukshutvam is the result of a long process. Arjuna got mumukshutvam for sure, but he had to experience some terrible experiences before he got that mumukshutvam. In fact, the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita answers the question, how to get mumukshutvam. You really want to know how to get mumukshutvam, how to get a burning desire for spiritual liberation, study the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The whole knowledge about this subject is given there. You will need to study until the 10th verse of the second chapter. You have to start with the first chapter. It's also good to know the story of the Mahabharata, and then you start. And then when you reach the 10th verse of the second chapter, you can ask someone to show you. Adi Shankaracharya, great master in our lineage, explains the 10th verse of the second chapter. And he refers to it as the explanation of everything that took place before. So, if we understand the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we will get the answer to this question, how to attain mumukshutva, because this is how Arjuna attained mumukshutva, burning desire for spiritual liberation. So, another teaching is given by Swami Shivananda himself in a book called Sadhana Chatushtayam, the four means of spiritual liberation. So he speaks there about how to attain mumukshutvam. In the Bliss Divine, that you can find it here, there is a chapter about the Sadhana Chatushtayam, the four means of spiritual liberation. There Swami Shivananda explained how to attain a burning desire for spiritual liberation. In a book that Swami Shivananda wrote, a small book that deals with the subject of vairagyam or dispassion, he explains how to attain a burning desire for liberation, and it goes on and on and on. So kindly take time and look into it, and the whole practice of yoga will lead us to the point where we will have a burning desire for spiritual liberation. For this, we need to have vairagyam. Vairagyam means dispassion. Dispassion comes from the power of discrimination, from our ability to discriminate between what is permanent and what is ephemeral. And this is a very important process of discrimination. More advanced to discern between what is real and what is unreal. This also helps. Vairagyam is most important. Vairagyam means dispassion. And it will lead to a burning desire for spiritual liberation. Now, when we look at the four means of spiritual liberation, we see, first of all, comes viveka, which means the power of discrimination. What discrimination? Between the permanent and the ephemeral, between the real and the unreal. Then comes dispassion, that is the result of the power of discrimination. This dispassion is giving up the vain hope that objects of the world are going to bring us felicity. They are not going to bring us felicity. You can be certain about it. Then vairagyam. Vairagyam is most important, this passion. Then comes a series of practices. There are 6 practices that are yogic practices and are necessary. And the result of all of it is mumukshutva. If you practice viveka, if you practice vairagyam, if you practice these 6 practices, the end result of this process will be a burning desire for spiritual liberation. So this by itself gives us an indication of how this happens. So we don't need to worry about it. The very practice of yoga will lead us to this. And a burning desire for spiritual liberation doesn't mean that we hate life. We actually we love it. It's the opposite. And it leads to the highest good. So these are good practices. We can learn it, we can practice it, and definitely there will be results.